Imagine being with someone you love deeply. You do everything right. It's loyal, intelligent, successful, loving, fun. And yet one day, it just starts to walk away. No fights, no explanation. He just silences. Gradually disappears, as if something had broken in silence. And the worst, you can't understand what happened. This scene, so common and so devastating, hides a truth that few women have the courage to face. Sometimes, even though we are amazing, we make subtle errors that drive a man away, not out of evil, but because we don't know how communication directly impacts male emotional bond. According to Deborah Tannen, renowned specialist in linguistics and relational dynamics, men interpret the words, gestures, and even silence in a completely different way from ours. It's not just what we say, but how we say, and how they process it inside. Small attitudes, phrases that seem harmless, or even connection attempts can be read as control, judgment, or devaluation. And when a man feels emotionally invaded or diminished, he does not react with confrontation. He withdraws, in silence, without explanations. This is exactly where the danger lives. Amazing women, women like you, are losing men who really loved them. Not because they were ugly, but because no one has ever taught them as men protect themselves emotionally. Deborah Tannen revealed that often the way we seek approach can be interpreted by them as critical. As we seek intimacy, they feel they are being charged, and then comes the removal, not for lack of love, but for pure defense mechanism. This silent disconnection corrodes relationships that had everything to work out, and maybe without realizing it, you are repeating the same standards. Perhaps it is making gestures of affection that are misunderstood. Perhaps it is opening waiting for reciprocity, but only finds distance, and that hurts. It hurts because, deep down, you know you're an amazing woman, but you don't understand why he always seems to be one step away. But today, all this will change. In this video, you will discover the 5 most common mistakes that even the most admirable women make, and who, without realizing it, are pushing the men who want the most by their side. Errors that are born of good intention, but from the male emotional perspective, sound like threats. We will unravel each one based on Deborah Tannen's studies, so that you understand how the silent logic of removal works, and especially how to turn this game to your advantage. If you felt you were giving you everything, and yet it has walked away, if you want to stop repeating cycles and finally understand what really connects a man deeply and lasting, this video will be a watershed. Get ready for an intense, revealing, and transformative journey. Because sometimes what separates love from abandonment, it is just a poorly placed sentence, and you deserve more than being misunderstood. You deserve to be loved the right way. The error of constant intimacy. There is a very common belief among women who love with intensity, that the more proximity, the more connection. More messages throughout the day, more calls, more good morning and good night, more questions about how he is, where he is, who is. After all, this is how many women show care and interest. But here is the shock. Second Deborah Tannen, the excess of intimacy can sound to many men as an unconscious attempt to control. For them, who were socialized to value autonomy and space as pillars of masculinity, this insistence on proximity can be read as emotional suffocation. Tannen explains that unlike women who build emotional ties through conversation and constant sharing, men tend to strengthen their bonds through shared action, and not necessarily continuous verbalization. When a woman requires uninterrupted flow of communication, man can interpret it as a charge or lack of confidence. He doesn't hear a, "I want to be closer." He listens to a, "You are doing something wrong." And when this happens, the first reaction is not to talk. It is to move away. This removal begins subtly. It takes longer to answer, no longer shares the details of the day as before, and gradually becomes a stranger. And you, without understanding, feel the urgency of getting even closer. Try to compensate with more affection, more messages, more presence. But the more you insist, the more it retreats. This is because for him, insistence reinforces the feeling of being invaded in his individuality. And it is at this point that many amazing women lose men who really loved them, not for lack of value, but out of overly delivery retained. It is painful to realize this, because deep down, all you wanted was to be close. Create a real connection. But if this connection does not respect the time and the way it opens emotionally, it is no longer a bridge and turns into pressure. And no matter how much you dedicate yourself, if he feels that his freedom is being threatened, he leaves silent, not because you stopped liking you, but because you are trying to preserve your own identity. This channel was created with a purpose, helping intelligent, sensitive, and dedicated women to understand the invisible codes of male emotional communication, so that they are never away without understanding why. Subscribe now, as here you learn to communicate irresistibly, powerfully, and conscious, without ever annulating yourself. The mistake of talking too much to solve. One of the biggest silent mistakes that pushes an emotionally moving man happens when the woman tries to solve everything talking. Is it strange, after all? Talking is not positive. Yes, but it depends on how and when this is done. Deborah Tannen shows that while women see dialogue as a path to connection, men often see these conversations as disguised clashes. For them, entering a deep dialogue can sound like entering a trial room where everything they do will be analyzed or criticized, even if this is not the intention. Tannen draws attention to the fact that men and women have completely different ways of using language. Women use speech to create bonds, express emotions, share experiences. Many men use language to solve problems directly, practical and objective. So when a woman starts a long conversation to talk about the relationship, he already feels defensive, because he sees it as something that needs to fix, solve, or worse, avoid. His silence after these conversations is not disinterest. It is emotional overload. And the more you try to open your heart, the more he closes his. Not for coldness, but because the way the conversation is structured, the male fear of inadequacy. He begins to think that he is always making mistakes, that will never be able to meet your expectations. And not knowing how to act, he chooses the most instinctive path, the removal. He shuts up, avoids emotional themes, and gradually disconnects himself to protect himself. The problem is that for the woman, his silence is interpreted as rejection, and it hurts. So she tries to get closer, starting another conversation, and the cycle repeats. It is not about talking less or silent, but about changing the communication strategy. The secret is not talking much, but in knowing when to speak and how to say what needs to be said. When female language finds male emotional time, the connection blooms true. If at some point you felt frustrated by trying to solve everything with dialogue, and yet he walked away, you are not alone. This is one of the most common and most painful errors that many amazing women make without realizing it. Comment here below. I just wanted to talk, and he fell silent. If you have already lived, this is your safe space to vent and break free. Their story can help other women understand that they are not wrong. They have only been misunderstood. The error of explaining too much not to be misunderstood. Have you been trying to explain, justify, or contextualize what you feel, just to prevent him from thinking something wrong with you? This attitude is born of the fear of being misunderstood, of seeming crazy, too intense, or needy. But ironically, this attempt at emotional control through excessive explanation can cause exactly the opposite effect. Deborah Tannen shows that women, by their socialization, are trained early on how to think about how their lines will be received, and therefore feel constantly need to clarify everything to keep the bond safely. Men often see this excess as a sign of insecurity. The problem is that the more you try to explain yourself, the more you feel that you are trying to convince you of something. Too much explanation conveys, unintentionally, a message of doubt, as if you were not right about what you are feeling and you were seeking validation from it. For man, this generates confusion and emotional weight. He begins to feel pressured to reassure you all the time, and and that steals from him something that Deborah Tannen calls the emotional neutrality zone, which many men need to feel peace within the relationship. The woman's intention is noble. She just wants him to understand her heart. But in trying to control the other's interpretation with too much words, she unintentionally undermines the naturalness of the connection. Man begins to feel that he needs to measure every word, every gesture, and spontaneity fades. Our elation transforms into a minefield of assumptions and over-explications. Romance gives way to tension, and when this happens, he prefers to escape the discomfort of what to keep sailing in this emotional confusion. Deborah Tannen teaches that often less is. The strength of women in communication is not saying everything, but in knowing how to choose the right time to say the essential, clearly, confidence, and pause. Safe silence communicates much more than 1,000 justifications. When you speak with emotional firmness, he listens with respect. When you justify yourself too much, he listens with fear of entering a relationship where you can never simply be. Therefore, keep this truth with love. You do not need to explain so much to be understood. You just need to position yourself with authenticity and serenity. The woman who speaks calmly and conviction, without run over to prove something, gains much more respect and connection than the one who tries to convince. He does not want a lawyer of love. He wants a safe partner of what he feels, even if he says little. The era of waiting for him to react as you would react. You already got it thinking, if it was me in his place, would I have done it differently? This internal comparison is more common than it seems, and it is one of the greatest reasons why so many amazing women disappoint each other in silence. Deborah Tannen explains that one of the biggest challenges between men and women is the unconscious expectation that the other will react in the same way we would react. Only this is a trap, because each one communicates, processes, and responds according to his emotional universe. And for many men, this universe is shaped by a logic completely different from female. While the woman reacts to emotion with more emotion, seeks to speak, approach, dive into what she feels, man tends to react with rationality or distancing. This does not mean coldness. It means emotional protection. He was not taught to dive into emotions, but to manage them silently, as who hides a treasure that fears losing. So when you expected the same sensitivity, spontaneity, or immediate depth you would have, what you find is frustration. And worse, it begins to feel alone within the relationship. Tannen argues that recognizing this difference is no less accept, but to understand the code of male communication. Man demonstrates affection in ways that are often not recognized as such: a practical gesture, a respectful silence, a constant presence. But by expecting him to say what you would say, or react as you would react, you may end up ignoring the real signs of affection it is offering. And that generates a cruel cycle. He feels he never hits. You feel that it is never corresponded. Of course, you deserve emotional reciprocity. But reciprocity is not mirroring. It is delivery within each one's emotional language. When you start looking beyond your reaction model, it begins to see how much he is trying, his way. And when he feels recognized for it, he approaches. He relaxes. He opens. Because the woman who understands him, unintentionally transforming him, is the woman he wants to stay with. Not because she accepts little, but because she understands enough to arouse the best in him. Now breathe and look back. How many times have you hurt yourself deeply just because you expected him to react in his own way? How many connections broke up because of the difference between what you expected and what could he give? Comment here below. Now I understand why he reacted that way. Your comment may be the thread that connects other women who are living the same doubt, the same pain, and perhaps the same liberation you are starting to feel now. The era of forgetting to be mystery. There is a belief not verbalized among many love women. The idea that the more transparent they are, the more value they will have. That revealing everything, showing everything, delivering everything is a sign of maturity and confidence. But there is a subtle, sometimes uncomfortable truth that Deborah Tannen helps to see. The deep connection also needs breaths, pauses, mystery spaces. Men, contrary to popular belief, they no longer feel connected when they know everything about you. They feel more instigated, more emotionally engaged when they are still discovering you. Tannen states that, in female communication, there is a tendency to fill each silence, explain each choice, detail each emotion, and this comes from the urge to create intimacy for clarity. But the male mind works in another way. It values the puzzle, the gradual discovery, the emotional territory that has not yet been completely explored. When you surrender all at once, without rhythm, without pause, he doesn't feel confidence. He feels satiety. And that's where he starts to disconnect. Not because you are not worth it, but the emotional curiosity, which sustains the desire, was diluted. This is not a game. It is not manipulation. It is emotional biology. It is the dance of the bond. The woman who can maintain her essence protected, who shares parts of herself with rhythm, silence, with well-placed breaks, creates an energy field that invites the man to want to dive deeper, to pursue more, to commit more. Excess exposure weakens magnetism. The lightness in mystery feeds the enchantment. You don't have to hide, but you don't have to explain yourself entirely at first. Let him wonder who you are. Let him feel that there is still something precious within you that will only be revealed to those who prove they know how to take care. This, according to Deborah Tannen, is what transforms common relationships into unforgettable bonds. This is what takes the relationship from the surface and takes it to the territory where love matures, the territory of admiration. And admiration exists only when there is still something to be revealed. Now take a deep breath and ask yourself, have I left any mystery alive on me? Perhaps the answer shows you why he stopped trying to conquer you, or why he still couldn't forget you. The well-dosed mystery is what keeps his heart curious, active, and involved. The truth you needed to hear. Perhaps throughout this video, you have felt a knot in your throat, a tightness in the chest, because at some point in your story, you did it all. You surrendered too much, spoke so much, waited too much, tried to explain yourself too much, and yet he walked away in silence. And you got the pain that only those who really love you know, the pain of not knowing where you made a mistake. But today, perhaps for the first time, you understood that it was not a lack of love. It was excessive misunderstandings, silent misunderstandings, hidden between the lines of emotional communication between two worlds they love in different ways. Deborah Tannen has always warned, men and women speak different languages, and many relationships are lost not for lack of feeling, but for lack of translation. The woman speaks seeking proximity. The man listens trying to protect his autonomy. The woman justifies himself trying to avoid misunderstandings. The man interprets this as instability. The woman expects emotional intensity. The man delivers a silent presence. And without an emotional manual, the two get lost, even loving themselves. But now, you have this manual. Now you are aware, and consciousness is the key that transforms your attitudes, your words, your position. You no longer need to run after trying to fix something on you. You just need to learn to communicate what you feel so that it understands and respect. You are an amazing woman, always has been. And when you learn how to use your voice strategically, with emotional wisdom, with pause, with rhythm, you will not only be heard, you will be valued. Remember, men do not move away because you are intense, sensitive, or too strong. They move away because they cannot decode their intention. When you change the way you speak without changing your essence, you recover the power you thought you had lost. And in this place of consciousness, you will never need to begging attention. Because the woman who understands her own emotional language is the woman who will never be ignored in silence again. If you have gotten here, it is because something inside you are awakening, something that no longer accepts to live relationships in which you give everything and receive crumbs. Like this video, Share it with a friend who also needs to hear this truth and subscribe to the channel right now. Here, you will learn to communicate irresistibly, consciously, and powerfully. Not to shape yourself, but to finally be understood without having to get lost yourself. Your next relationship begins with a new language, and this language starts here. We have come to the end of this journey, but you may be just starting to see what you have always been before your eyes. It's not about changing who you are. It is not about silent or accepting less than it deserves. It is about understanding that love often does not die. It is only lost in translation. Deborah Tannen taught us what language is power. And when you learn to use your emotional language with conscience, you stop being misunderstood and come to be understood, admired, and respected. The errors that remove men in silence are not born from evil. They are born of innocence, of the deep desire to love and be loved. But now, with each part of this video, you have gained tools. Tools to position yourself with more emotional intelligence, more clearly, with more magnetism. Not to manipulate, but to stop suffering. To stop getting lost in relationships that drain, confusing, hurting, and starting to build relationships that are strengthening, that they raise. You deserve someone to see your value, who respects your silences, which responds to your delivery with presence, not with a distance. But before that, you need to recognize this value within you. You need to stop running after what hurts and start running towards what makes sense. Men come and go, but your voice, your intelligence, your ability to communicate with truth that no one can get from you. His silence does not define you. His removal does not diminish his light. The question was never about being good enough. It was about being read the wrong way. And now, with everything you have learned here, you have the key to turning this game. The next time a man gets into his life, he will not find an insecure woman trying to prove himself. He will find a safe, lucid, charming, and strategically irresistible woman, not because he says a lot, but because he knows exactly what to say and when to say. If this video has played something inside you, don't keep it just for you. Like, comment, share. Subscribe to the channel to continue receiving content that really open your eyes and strengthen your soul. Her transformation started here, but she can go much further. And the first step was taken today. If you got here, congratulations. This shows that you really value yourself and are willing to better understand male behavior so as not to fall into the same emotional traps. I want to invite you to leave a comment by saying, I watched until the end, so I can get to know you better and know who is really committed to strengthening yourself emotionally and building healthier relationships. And of course, check now if you are already subscribed to the channel. If you are not yet, click the subscribe button so as not to lose the next content that will open your eyes even more. If this video helped you, leave your like so that more women also receive this message, and share it with a friend who deserves to break free from relationships that only suck your energy and attention. Most women only realize that they are attached to a destructive emotional cycle when they are already emotionally exhausted. In the first comment said, I left the link to a complete playlist with content that can open your eyes before it happens to you. Watch now. We will meet in the next video.